Hello and welcome in to the Recruiting Blitz. I am Greg Smith, Senior Recruiting Analyst here at Inside Nebraska, and I am joined once again by digital content extraordinaire Jansen Coburn. Jansen, how are you, man?
Man, Greg, I'm doing good, but it feels like I haven't slept. I don't know about you.
Yeah, that's exactly what it feels like. I feel like it's just like one whirlwind after the other. And that means that Nebraska football is busy, right? It has been kind of an extremely busy time for the program. As I feel like I was saying this on another thing, like Nebraska, Matt Rule and his staff, this is their first go around really with these June official visits, right? Because they weren't really a thing when he was at Baylor. He got out for the Panthers right as that was happening. And then, he comes back, and that's one of the big key changes in college football. And so you've seen them kind of grow and evolve as this month has gone on. And it feels like it took a couple of weeks maybe, but they really hit their stride with bringing the right guys in, having their camps, and then landing a slew of commitments. And we've got a lot of them to talk about. So we can jump right in, Jansen. What do you got?
Oh, what do I got? I got seven scholarship commits and two walk-ons to talk about, and then obviously we'll recap some of the other guys that haven't committed and save the best for the last, talking about Carter Nelson. But since the last recording we got to talk about three commits, and then there was a fourth that trickled in on Monday. So we'll start with him. That was Evan Taylor out of North Carolina. Let's jump right in, talk about Evan Taylor.
Yeah, it's interesting. And Evan Taylor, it's funny. He's because of the timing, and it's not his fault. It's just the timing and all of the slew of commitments that happened. He's going to get lost in the shuffle. But I think we're going to circle back to him when we get to December for the signing period. And I think people are really going to like him as he's a long, athletic cornerback, but our defensive back that also can continue to grow into maybe that rover position or even an outside linebacker. If he keeps adding weight, he's got a great frame. I really like Evan Taylor. Like, it's not often that Nebraska goes into North Carolina and pulls out a recruit. So that's really interesting as well. But I think they got a good one in Evan Taylor.
Yeah, and then the next day, I think it was the next day, Landon Davidson commits out of Colorado's offensive lineman. Talk about him.
Yeah, and he's a guy, another one of the many now that have committed here recently that camped for Nebraska, right? So Nebraska got to see Landon up close and personal. Anytime you were around 300 pounds and you run a sub 5 40-yard dash, that's going to get coaches' attentions, even on the offensive line. And how many times as Husker fans say to us, "Oh man, the offensive line they can't pull, they can't do this, they're not athletic enough." Well, this kid's definitely athletic enough. And Matt Rule had told Landon that he would have even offered him on the defensive line had he not, had Donovan Raiola not gotten a hold of him first. And so he's a real interesting prospect to me. And another one of those guys, and it fits into to me with all of those offensive linemen that are in the class right now. They've all got chips on their shoulders. They all play to the echo of the whistle, and he fits right in perfectly with that.
Is he more of a guard or a tackle, would you say?
Boy, I would say he's more of a guard. But I could see him. He could be one of those guys in a pinch that could go out to tackle. We see that all the time. But I think he's more of a guard.
Yeah, well, though, seems like they cross-train those guys anyway, so we'll see what happens there. All right, and then the next commit, we got to talk about Donovan Jones out of Omaha North. That one moved pretty quickly. Talk about him a little bit.
Yeah, Donovan Jones is another one of those. He camped for Nebraska. I think it was at the Friday Night Lights camp, and he was a guy that was getting a lot of buzz coming out of that camp. Spent a lot of time working with the coaches. He ran well in front of them as well, and I think anytime you're like 6'1", and a long athlete, and you run well, and I think it was backed up by his tape. Like he had a lot of tackles at Omaha North last year. Played obviously on the same defense as Tyson Terry, did a Nebraska 2025 commitment. He's a good player, and I think one of those ones that was way under the radar in the state, right? We talk about so many of the guys in the state, and now that list of offered guys has ballooned to double digits for Nebraska in the state. But he went under the radar, and lo and behold, they really coveted him once they got eyes on him.
You mentioned him being part of the in-state kind of slew of guys that committed. I think this is where things got interesting. No disrespect to any of the other guys we mentioned, but the weekend came, the official visits happened over the weekend, and two guys jump in the boat at once on Instagram Live, I believe. Isaiah McMorris and Davon Hall, and that was pretty big news. I don't think you can understate just the job Matt Rule and his staff did getting those guys to commit. So the way I'm going to ask you about this one, Greg, is if I had told you about a month and a half ago that these guys were going to be Huskers, what would you have said to me?
Ooh, I would have said there was not a great chance of you getting both. Maybe you get McMorris 6 weeks ago, maybe. And then if you had asked me, I thought you were going to say a year ago because I would have told you
Yeah.
absolutely not. The
Completely
job I'm with.
different story.
Yeah, I think that you nailed it though. Like you can't understate the job that these guys, the coaching staff did in kind of reeling both of them in and getting back on kind of in their good graces in their recruitment to the point to where they've now shut it down with them in June to kick off a huge visit weekend. And I think that you're right about that too. I think that things got real when that happened on Friday because it really has started this or continued, but really picked up big steam with this snowball effect that's going on with the class right now. But no, it's a tremendous job by those guys. And I definitely think that for all of the talk that we've had everywhere on this YouTube channel, on the Insiders board, on social media, everywhere about Garrett McGuire and his age, obviously kids like him, right?
Yeah.
Like because he's instrumental in bringing these two guys into the fold. Now remember, it was the same weekend that Danny Kalen committed, and I talked to Isaiah McMorris, and McMorris surprised me by saying that Garrett McGuire at that point was the wide receiver coach that he had maybe the strongest relationship with, and that kind of perked my ears up a little bit. And so yeah, kudos to Garrett and those guys for bringing them back in the fold. And then on the field is a tremendous grab for Nebraska. Like once you get past all of the good vibes in state, right? Because these guys not only are both two really good prospects, they complement each other perfectly, right? As you have one guy, McMorris, that plays more in the slot, but is still kind of a home run hitter. And then you have Hall, who also has great track speed, is a little bit bigger and can do a little bit of everything out there at wideout. It'll be fun on Friday nights at Bellevue this year.
That's a good point you mentioned about Garrett McGuire. So I have a question on that. Do you think that their commitment to Nebraska, I mean, maybe it's both, but do you think it has more to do with Daniel Kalen being in the class now, or do you think Garrett McGuire's just done that good of a job kind of swaying them?
It's probably both, if we're being honest. But I do think that it's one of those where Daniel Kalen probably opened the door for them to kind of take a more serious look at Nebraska, especially Hall. I think McMorris was already starting to trend towards Nebraska, but still obviously needed to be recruited. But then once Kalen got them to look, then Garrett McGuire could kind of come in and really say, oh, they could really feel comfortable with him and think that, yeah, this is the place for me. And I think it's on another side note about kind of the in-state thing with them in particular. It's been really neat to see everyone kind of rallying around those two guys joining the class from Omaha and how it's becoming cool to stay home again, right? You've seen so much stuff all over the place. And I think that that's something that it does just hit differently when it's these guys from in-state, right? Like it just feels a lot different.
I think you hit the nail right on the head. It feels like, just as you said, it is cool to stay home, and that seems to be why they're having so much success. And we'll talk about another in-state guy here in a minute, but 2 more commits today. That's why you guys are seeing this on Tuesday and not Monday. We waited a day to record this, and it paid off because we got 2 more commits we can talk about. Kaiwan Lacey and Rex Guthrie. I know Kaiwan is a guy that Steve Mark really, really likes.
That's his guy.
That's his guy. All right, let's talk first about Kaiwan Lacey, running back out of Texas, lives really close to Mario Buford. And I think Matt Rule might have cryptically tweeted a little bit about landing him. So let's dive right on into Kaiwan.
Yeah, it's funny because Garrett McGuire, we were talking about him. He also cryptically tweeted about it because he had a tweet about Beltline Road. And if you know about that area of Texas, Beltline Road runs around those towns. So yeah, they both were kind of getting after it and having some fun on Twitter. But Lacey, really, really good prospect. I think that Steve Mark's excitement is warranted. That guy just looks like someone that's going to be, he was either destined to run in the Big Ten or the SEC. It is no coincidence that Nebraska and Ole Miss were really the 2 top teams vying for him. In the end of kind of when he decided to announce. I think he's going to be a really fantastic addition for Nebraska. He can run downhill. He's got good speed. He also has good hands out of the backfield. And he physically looks the part and he looks ready to play when he gets here next fall.
You know, I think it's even more impressive when you look at what Lane Kiffin's done with his running back at Ole Miss. So for Nebraska to kind of sway him in the late hours, if you will, of his recruitment, that was pretty impressive. All right, the last one of the day. This one happened less than an hour ago as of recording this. Rex Guthrie out of Colorado. I want to read the commitment quote he gave Steve when he committed. He was talking to Evan Cooper. Where is it? All right, here we go. This is what Rex told Steve. He said he was telling me, I don't care about rankings because what you have right now, you can be whatever you want to be if we work hard. So that was what Evan Cooper said about Rex. And yeah, he's a fast guy, but kind of another one of those under the radar ones. So what do you think about him?
Yeah, I think that this is a guy, and I've already said this on our board. If you watch his tape, you will wonder why he's a 2-star. Like I'm serious, and it's a real interesting situation. Like I'm not sure either. He's 6'1", 200 pounds. He ran a 4.440 in front of Nebraska, and he ran one at the Wyoming camp as well. So that's consistent. It wasn't just some fluke. He's a sure tackler, and he looks tough, right? And so I think he's a guy like that's why I think Evan Cooper is so excited about him, and then why what we see from Steve Mark as well. And I think that there's good reason for that. I think he's a guy that can contribute on special teams right away for Nebraska as well. I really like Rex Guthrie, and I think that Nebraska got a steal out of Colorado in him.
All right. We got to show some love for the walk-on commits that happened as well in this span of time. There's two, James Williams out of Iowa Central Community College and Isaac Dickey out of Cross County. Let's start with James Williams. Let's talk about him.
Yeah, a long pass rusher, right? And that it's funny because sometimes you just kind of look at what Nebraska has done under Matt Rule and kind of just all of these additions and seeing if you can grab and get something out of guys, right? And I think that this is another one of those situations where maybe you take a flyer and you see as a walk-on, if a guy that, still has, 4 years of eligibility ahead of him, and was productive and had 6 sacks in JUCO last year. If you can get him in the program, build him up, and see if he can continue to produce, he's an interesting flyer, and I'll be curious to see what happens with him moving forward.
Yeah, it's interesting they got a JUCO guy. It seems like I'd say biasly, it's good to see JUCO guys get scholarships, or not scholarships, but get offers still, because it seems like things have gotten taken over by the portal.
Few and far between.
Yeah. And then last one we mentioned, Isaac Dickey, walk on, but a fullback. So probably gonna be walk-ons getting those offers, or getting a walk-on offer. But I believe Cross County, Stromsburg, Nebraska. He came out to the camps, the fullback camp. So talk about him.
I mean, if you want a poster child for what people think a fullback should look like, it would be Isaac Dickey. And he's from small town Nebraska. He came to kind of this first fullback camp and was one of the standouts at that. He's a weight room warrior. He's going to be I'm going to be real curious to see if he can't force his way into some playing time at some point during his career. And I say that because he just works, right? And Steve Mark had a really good story on him at InsideNebraska.com about kind of his journey and how he's gotten here, and so go check that out for sure. But it'll be curious, because he would be a fan favorite if he can get onto the field, and he's going to be doing everything he can, busting his tail to get on the field.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, there were 3 other guys that took visits that haven't committed, and we just assuming that if you visit, you're going to commit based on the other 7. Quinn Clark, Ernest Campbell, and Grant Bricks. We don't have to go into detail about Quinn Clark, because I'm not sure if we were able to recap much with him, unless you want to talk about that one. But take your pick, Greg. Which one do you want to start with first between those 3? What kind of what details did those guys share?
Yeah, so I caught up with Clark a little bit. He just didn't really say all that much. And then it really was, he liked the visit. I think that Nebraska, believe I have a future cast in for him. So many things happen. And so I do think that he ends up at Nebraska. He's a legacy player. His late father played for the Huskers. And so he grew up as a Husker fan. And I think that this visit was really about kind of checking the boxes to make sure that he got along with the coaching staff. So it wouldn't surprise me if he's in the class sooner rather than later as a wide receiver, 6'5" out of Montana. Ernest Campbell, another wide receiver out of Texas, and one of the fastest players in America. Ran, I think it was a 10.22 40 or 100 meter dash in the state championships in Texas track this year. He's a really good player and a guy who's been on the rise. It's a 4-star down there. Texas A&M, Texas Tech heavily involved with him. He said that the visit exceeded all of his expectations that he had, which is always a good sign. I think he just needs to sit down and talk things over with his family to kind of see where he lands. He did release a top 6 today. That was kind of surprising considering I think he only took visits to 2 or 3 of those schools, so we'll see where that goes. And then probably the second most important visitor that was on campus this weekend, Grant Brix, the big offensive lineman out of Iowa. Boy, I mentioned earlier about how all of those offensive linemen in the class have that mean streak and they play to the echo of the whistle. Grant Brix is just like that. He would fit in that perfectly. Really nice kid from the times that I've talked to him. I actually did not get a chance to catch up with him this time for this visit, but in talking to other people about the recruitment and about the visit weekend, he had a good time. The kids were really kind of working him, led by Ian Flint and Gibson Pyle, 2 of Nebraska's other good peer recruiters as well. And so I like where Nebraska is. We'll just kind of have to see because Grant's a little bit quieter.
All right, and then we saved the most interesting one for last. Carter Nelson came off his visit. Seemed like he enjoyed it. Momentum seems to be on Nebraska's side. Let's start just with a simple visit recap. What did you hear?
Yeah, I think that part of what you hear is that everyone was working Carter Nelson to make sure that he knew that he was welcome in this class should he choose to join Nebraska. I also think that part of the pitch of him being able to fit in very nicely with the tight end that Nebraska already has in this class and already on the team is also part of the pitch. And then I think the most compelling thing, which is something that has become a theme of what we've talked about today and growing the subplot with this recruiting class, is that what it could be like for Carter Nelson to stay home and be a home state hero, right? I think that has become just a really neat thing that's happened over the time with this class. I don't know if you saw the picture of him with the state flag, which I thought was really cool. There's the picture of him along with Daniel Kalen and the other Nebraska-born guys in that huddle. Like, and I talked to Daniel Kalen actually about that in another video that's on this YouTube channel and how kind of the origins of that photo was. He said he did make up a play call in that huddle, by the way. He did give them a play call, and Carter was the only guy that was not committed, obviously, that was in that huddle. But they did everything they could. I think Nebraska's in a very good spot, obviously. I put in a future cast over the weekend for him for Carter Nelson to end up picking Nebraska. He then came out today, Monday, and said that he will make his announcement on Wednesday at noon. So I think Nebraska fans should be optimistic and excited about that one, and it would be a huge deal given some of the ups and downs in this recruitment that we've seen, and then what he would mean for this recruiting class for Nebraska if he so chooses to join it.
You mentioned his announcement coming on Wednesday. This is the last question I got saved for you. Is little prediction time. You initially had a future cast of Georgia. You switched to Nebraska, but it seems like everybody who's been covering this has done the same. So what makes you confident in predicting Nebraska in this case?
Yeah, I think that it all makes sense for Carter Nelson to actually stay home and pick Nebraska. And I think that sometimes, the factor of it's not just, it's easy to say that, oh, yeah, it's cool to stay home, right? And that is true. But also the underlying thing there is that this staff has been able to gain the trust of these players. And I think that makes that's a huge, huge deal that they were able to, even though they went through kind of the thing with Dylan Raiola, they were able to keep Daniel Kalen in the fold and then flip him right away. And then they were able to go and grab those kids from Bellevue West There's other in-state kids in the class. So I think that Carter being able to go to those kids and say, hey, why is it that you actually really like this staff? And then, oh, by the way, he comes on campus and he probably saw that exact stuff, right? That was, I think, a really big thing for him. Plus, I just honestly think that the location factor, I think, probably plays a really huge role in this in the end. And that really, it sounds great to go to Athens, Georgia, from, Ainsworth, Nebraska. Like, it's a big adjustment, though, both culturally and what it takes to get down there, to be able to go see your kid play if you're the parent. So there's just a lot of stuff that goes into that. As to why I think Nebraska's kind of sitting in a really good position right now.
All right, Greg. Well, that's all I got for you today. I'll save the rest for later. I know you got to get on the Husker radio here in about a half hour. So is that right? Is it 6:30?
Yeah. Yeah,
right.
I'll be out there. And it's a busy time, man. And it's only going to, well, I was going to say it's only going to get busier. From Nebraska, it may or may not get busier. We'll see. There's a lot going on, though. And, as the dead period is here, but this is also the time where a bunch of guys make their announcements because now they've been able to take all of their June official visits. So you'll definitely want to like this video, subscribe to the YouTube channel to make sure you get those videos directly into your feed. Also, pop over to InsideNebraska.com to make sure you can catch all the great recruiting content and just general football content that's happening right now. And we will catch you guys later.